Sandon was an internment camp for 2 years, and it kind of gets lost in the whole mining history. And that's what most people are here to see, but there's this other story it's important for people to know about.
There was only about 100 people living here by the time World War II rolled around, and they sent 933 Japanese Canadians here. And there were all these abandoned buildings, so the Japanese Canadians just moved in, they fixed up all the buildings, they brought their culture, they started doing traditional Japanese ceremonies.
In 1942, when the BC Securities Commission were preparing Sandon, and so they made a deal with the Silversmith Mining Company. The company had some of their best employees train Japanese Canadian operators and maintenance people, engineers that operated that power plant entirely from 1942 to 44. About 1944, they took the people from here and dispersed them to other purpose-built internment camps where the conditions were horrible. Those were important years. This unwantingly became the home to a lot of really great people who had nothing to return to. A tragic part of our history, and I think it should be presented in the good, bad, and ugly sense, not to sanitize their history, but to tell the real story about discrimination and prejudice and hate. And the fact that it still goes on today, I think, is why it's really important that people can learn about this. And hopefully we just do better in the future.
Carolyn Nakagawa was the curator. Danielle Jett was the designer and illustrator. Caroline wanted to tell the story in the words of the internees. She found poignant, representative quotes, artifacts, photos, things that told the story, preserving and commemorating historical injustice that happened to the Japanese Canadian community. So this is the opening ceremony, the ribbon cutting, and we're ready to present it to the public.
Well, when I look at the pictures, my first reaction is, oh, that looks like my auntie and my mother. And it brought back those kinds of memories about my family. Also a very important understanding about what has happened here. All these people were put into a beautiful country, but so foreign to them and having to adapt to survive in this area.
My good friend Grace and I are still very connected. I feel her family's pain at being taken away from their homes. The Doukhobors felt a connection to the Japanese because they were both being persecuted for nothing that they did wrong. And when they saw people that were losing their homes like the Doukhobors had, they wanted to help, and their heart went out to these people. And my grandfather became very involved in justice issues, especially, with Japanese Canadians. And my family also knew people that brought vegetables to the Japanese. They helped them get through the first year, basically.
It's great for our children to know kind of things that have happened and how we need to stand up for ourselves and understand what's going on.
I think it's very important because no one knows what really happened because Japanese don't speak out about things. We would ask our parents what's going on. They would never divulge anything to us. I think it's a good thing to let the outside world know what really happened because they sacrificed a lot.
People formed a community, but there'd also be lots of stresses going on here, right? Japanese people were really affected by war. They lost everything. The Japanese communities were broken up completely. I just think about the hardship of moving out here.
Well, I was thinking about my mother and father. I was hoping that they would have been able to see all this and what they're saying about the Japanese people, because our mom and dad didn't talk about it. Shogunai, that's what my father used to say. I only found out about the Japanese Canadian until I was in grade 7.
I was the last baby born here in Sandon. I was born in May and they closed it down in July. And then after, we were one of the last ones to leave from here, so when we got to New Denver, the house was taken. And that's when we went to Roseberry and stayed there.
When my family moved to New Denver, 1948, New Denver was segregated, but in our neighborhood, there were 3 or 4 Japanese families. I don't remember any prejudice. You know, we had a beautiful life and upbringing. As I grew up and learned about the history and internment, I found it extremely upsetting. One day I ran into Tad Mori. He said, it's a time for forgiveness. And healing isn't getting mad. Healing is forgiveness. Despite all of the injustices and horrible hardships they went through, they had this art of forgiveness.
I think it's great because we got to preserve the history. We are part of the history of Canada. It was a sad time in history, but we got to work through and support it all. I think it's important that people attend and be there because a lot of this disappears.
The older people are slowly disappearing, but we're seeing their children and their grandchildren really wanting to learn about that chapter in history.
With the redress movement and the apology, the Japanese Canadian Legacy Society, there's kind of this flourishing, this blooming that's happening now. The Sansei and the Yonsei and the Gosei, they're interested in their own history again. We have seen in recent years certain ethnicities can be marginalized and persecuted. History doesn't always repeat itself, but sometimes it rhymes, and it's important to recognize the patterns of injustice to make sure that it doesn't happen again.